Hello, and welcome to the next episode, the last episode in the Lenten Restoration series. I've been doing this for now 4 weeks, all throughout Lent, pretty much. Holy Week is next week. So, thank you for joining me. We are returning to regularly scheduled bi weekly Fiddler's Green podcast for the foreseeable future, where I talk about current events and discourse, as I think most people want me to do. It's funny when I originally did this, when I decided to do this series that would be focused on apolitical topics, I think everyone, it's so funny because every week I ask guys for this next episode of the Fiddler's Green podcast or broadcast from Fiddler's Green, what topic do you want me to cover? And every single time without fail, the people who reply to this kind of feeler, usually what I'm looking for is some current event, because the Fiddler's Green podcast is a podcast that is dedicated to going over the events of the last 2 week period. That's why I put 2 weeks in between each broadcast episode, because oftentimes there's not enough to monologue about with just 1 week's worth of news. God knows I probably could have done that several times in this series that's run more or less weekly. It's been kind of an eventful 4 week period, an eventful month, shall we say. But invariably, all of the people who are ordinary listeners to the Fiddler's Green podcast always say, well, I don't want to do politics. I don't want to hear you talk about how discourse is dead again, Dave. Every week you tell me the discourse is dead, and reviewing how much more dead it is not going to make it any more alive. I want you to talk about cultural avenues, things that we could be doing in the real world, take it in a different direction. And I guess my thought was, well, I'm off of Twitter. Twitter is usually the number one way that I get material. I get kind of things to put in the ordinary bi-weekly podcast. I usually go to Twitter to get those things. I might as well just see what happens if I take 4 weeks. Instead of doing every other week, I do every week broadcasts, and I do them on cultural topics that have nothing to do with politics or discourse. And I guess I'm kind of breaking that here by explaining the motivations for doing this to begin with. But I mean, it's funny because every Sunday I kind of log into Twitter as kind of a break fast. A lot of people do this. Some people don't with their Lenten fast. They give themselves a day off on Sunday. I find that it's a little, at least with Twitter, it's a little easier because I do need to kind of stay abreast of current events. And without Twitter, I mean, what am I supposed to do? Go to CNN and figure out what's going on? They're going to tell me like we went to war with Iran or something like that. And every time I come back, this week in particular, just I don't think people on X really understand how crazy discourse there looks relative to other platforms. If you're stuck on Substack and then you go over to X, the level of autism there is really off the charts. Maybe Substack is a bad example, but just not having the day-to-day back and forth, just only checking in on it every week, when you eventually do return, it just the amount of absolute autism on display is just really amazing. People just get completely lost in the sauce. They get completely disconnected from what is going on. I think that in many ways, and I do sympathize with this, in many ways, the Iran war really led people to kind of make a break from reality a little bit. I can't tell you how much the war in Iran has kind of been something that's really been depressing me recently. I don't even really know what to do with it. All I can do is kind of sit back and watch. It's so far away from anything anyone I know supports that I'm just kind of wonder. It just feels like it's disconnected. It might as well be Russia waging this war, as far as I can tell, because I don't feel that I have any kind of. Not only do I not have control over the American government, I don't really have contact with anybody who supports this war or thinks it's a good idea. Everyone I know is either a reactionary and opposes Israel generally and Zionism generally, or they are a progressive, liberal, leftist of some variety, in which case They oppose it because it's Orange Man bad. And so this whole war is just going on as this train wreck, and I have no way of even interacting with any kind of conversation or argument or reasoning about why it's going on to begin with. Not that our government hasn't made it very clear why they're going to war in Iran. It was kind of with Iraq, it was always touchy about the ultimate motivations. There were three levels of explanations about why we went to war in Iraq. There was the 9/11 one, the revenge for 9/11. There was the weapons of mass destruction. There was the energy security. There was the axis of evil and the World War II analogies. And then kind of lurking behind there was our relationship with our greatest ally, which turns out might have been an undervalued reason why that original war kicked off to begin with as well. And I don't know what to say. There's not really much to say, but I noticed that in the meantime, everyone on the right wing discourse space has totally gone insane, and they're just turning on each other for no reason whatsoever. I have seen several people that I thought were reasonably reliable individuals. I will not name names because I do not want to feed the drama, but I saw at least 3 or 4 people this last Sunday who I thought were more or less stable and reasonable individuals just throw out bold-faced accusations against other people based on really no evidence, based on just guilt by association. They do these little charts that are like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Instead of doing 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, they do, can I put you within 6 degrees of separation from Ben Shapiro? Okay, so since you know R.N. McIntyre, and R.N. McIntyre knows Glenn Beck, and Glenn Beck knows Ben Shapiro, therefore 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, you are an ally of Ben Shapiro. This is just absolutely crazy. This is not how adults think. This is not how anybody works who has done business or who has to make decisions in a constrained environment. I hate to begin this talk with a scolding, but I'm kind of building to something here. First of all, I guess, good Lord, you'll tune in 2 weeks from now when I do my ordinary podcast. I assure you I'll be talking about this discourse again, because I guarantee and nothing else will be happening in the next 2 weeks on the right. That's not going to be this. I'm going to be writing an essay. There's a bunch of other people who've been doing excellent work. If people are on Substack, they've hopefully been following Deadly New Right. He has done a variety of different podcasts that I thought were phenomenal. And so there's people who are doing good work. There'll be interesting things to talk about insofar as what X looks like, at least insofar as non-progressive X operates, or what was formerly called Twitter. This is just going to dominate. It's this insane infighting. People just finding any reason to turn on each other because they have no ability to impact the rest of the world. It's because they have, they're feeling like me, as if they're just watching a disaster being done in their name, and they have no ability to control it. So the only thing they can do is to find former allies and then just kind of make up just so stories about how they're terrible people with no evidence. And then, totally burn down their business relationships for no apparent reason. And this kind of reminds me of just some things that people have been talking about and that people have said to me we've been talking about community building and becoming effective actors in the real world. And I will say this, despite the spurgery that's happening now, despite the constant, every single week, I have denounced the dissident right. I have denounced the dissident right. Every week, somebody new is denouncing the dissident right, at least in America. I think in the UK, the Keir Starmer regime has kind of everyone more focused. And because of the fact that their government isn't the one that is being used as a proxy weapon in someone else's war, they're more detached from it. They can talk about the Iran war in a more kind of objective way without kind of becoming apoplectic. I'm not so sure I could talk about the Iran war without becoming apoplectic. I think that it's just very difficult for me to kind of maintain objectivity. And I unlike people on X or Twitter, I don't see the utility in just spurging out and going on a rant about the various groups involved, or my little yarn diagram about how those various influencer groups are connected to other thought leaders that I've worked with and have had business relationships with in the past, or in some sense personal relationships. There's just no reason to do this in it. And so um but it reminded me again, despite all of this spurgery, I am very proud of the amount of wins that distance spaces have been able to get. I run a page called the Green Book, where I just highlight, I'm trying to spin this into a larger project with the Redwood Society of California, where I go to people who are organizers, who are cultural creators, who are community builders, who are doing positive things in their own community locally, and I highlight them, and I try to make this a database for references that people can use. If anything needs this, it's California. Although, insofar as the web presence is concerned, it's going to be sort of a broader survey of everybody in the Western Sphere. Last week, I interviewed the people behind the Corn Crake magazine, which is this wonderful little high-class, glossy literary magazine that emphasizes new authors and combines them with old kind of Western canon favorites in the short story, poetry variety. It was very, very good that way. And this is something that I want to do to contribute to sort of the positive things that the right wing community has been able to give back. I don't say the right wing community; that sounds horrible. I mean, the community of distance, as I like to say. Who knows what right wing means? It means non-progressives. It means people who are not beholden so tightly to the neoconservative establishment and its many wonderful, wonderful international engagements that they start with no prospect of ever finishing or winning or bringing to a satisfactory conclusion. It's all of these things, it's the little things that really make a difference that we've done, not our broader political affiliations, and certainly not elected politicians that I look back on and think are great. But there's something that my friend Blackhorse, who's involved with an organization called Beowulf, said to me. He said, the reason why, or one of the main reasons why online organizing is kind of an impossibility is that you can't ever walk into an online space and kind of size people up. Everything that we have in the modern world are these presentations that are highly curated, they're highly artificial. I like to think that I am more or less the person that I am in real life when I speak on these podcasts. I have a little bit of social anxiety that makes me, I think, somewhat more awkward in real life sometimes. Usually I think I'm pretty easygoing even then. But overcoming that, my history as an engineer, I was never really a people's person in my profession. So I kind of maintained that, unfortunately. But I like to think, nevertheless, that I'm more or less the same person in real life as I am on these streams. I think, though, that insofar as that applies to other people or other content creators, especially when it gets to sort of written and short forms like on X, that is very, very often not the case. You have people, and this is really important for men too. I promise you, this is going in the direction. This is going in the direction of my topic tonight. This is not idle chatter. I am actually bringing this to a head in the restoration of the private arts, as I like to call them. So, the main problem of the internet is it's just a feminine platform. Everything we do on this platform is feminine, and what can you do in on the internet? Strictly speaking, obviously we can do things in real life, but if you're this disembodied entities in this anonymous space, well, you can talk about ideas and discourse and dialectic, presuming that there's a shared agreement on values and presuming that people are good faith, which are, initially it felt like that was a sort of minimal assumption to discourse and debate, back in the before times of 2026. or 2016 again, right when I started my channel. Again, I started this channel in the March of 2016 properly. That was my first real video. The set of videos I made about Sargon of Akkad way back. It's been 10 years of this. I think I'm going to do a retrospective on the Substack, but it's been 10 years of this. And back in the day, I always say this, and people, though, on the internet now, they don't realize that this was the case. There is an understanding that people coming to the table would be coming to the table to talk in good faith, and that there would be some set of shared values. This is before the person who really ruined this, in my mind, well, I guess two people. It was the IBS people like Andy Worski, and it was, the drama streamers, as I like to call them. And then more than even that, it was Destiny, and then Vosh and the other people like Hassan Piker, the debate pros. And now there are sort of the base debate pros that agree with me on everything, like Andrew Wilson. We're not the same religion, so obviously we don't agree on everything. But I always think of Andrew Wilson as like a necessary evil. It's like, okay, if they're going to have nukes, then I want nukes on our side too. But this just destroyed the ecosystem for actual conversations. So you can have conversations, you can yell at each other, which is what, if two debate bros walk into a room, Vosh and Andrew Wilson, or Destiny and Andrew Wilson, or any of these people, it's just basically a shouting match over who can maintain frame, because neither debater will ever concede frame. And when neither side is in the same frame, then the only thing they're ever going to be doing is trying to grab the mic and then, kind of cast word spells on the audience to try to get the audience to accept their moral presuppositions, their assumptions about value, to understand them as the main character and the other person as the bad person. And so it's just a big game that way. But okay, let's say the discourse is off the table, as it has been for the last 5 years, if not more. What else can you do online? Well, online you can build followings of people, which on YouTube these days is impossible. I've been losing subscribers, which is, the stream, people have been watching the streams. They're not as popular as the ones that are about politics. People watch the streams. They certainly have, I don't think they've gone down in quality at all, but people watch them. But the subscriber count's gone down, which is unprecedented. Subscriber counts never used to go down, and now they're literally going down. You can watch it fall. And I know that other people like Aiden Paladin, another kind of YouTuber from exactly my era, with very much my same sensibilities in terms of us both being kind of part of the NRX sphere, both being of an academic background and both being Christians. I don't know if Aiden is Catholic, but whatever. It's we're both kind of a kindred spirit in that way. And we're both suffering from this algorithmic change. So you can build in the algorithm, which is essentially just chasing ghosts and basically following the herd. It's basically a contest of fashion. The algorithm will move in one way, and then you have to conform yourself to the algorithm as fast as possible and as slavishly as possible, and then try to predict it for a hot minute. And that's the game. So that's basically fashion. And then the other thing is this sort of constant drama and signaling and putting up with appearances and kowtowing to an audience to get them like you. These are all highly feminine behaviors. Branding. You need to make sure that if you want to ask me what this whole kerfuffle about the dissident right is, and the whole cycle where we denounce the dissident right again and again, and while people make up these, again, just so stories about how 6 degrees of separation from Ben Shapiro means that you're part of a cabal of Zionists. This has nothing to do with ideas. This has nothing to do with effective political organization. This has everything to do with branding. And branding is a highly effeminate activity. There's a reason why gay men and women tend to go into these kind of, in this kind of modern marketing occupations where you're not really trying to assert an artistic vision. It's less like Mad Men and more like you're just trying to ingratiate yourselves in trends and start like a big kerfuffle where everyone has to pay attention to you. The era of woke marketing is you're not trying to, Don Draper, he tries to be cool, right? He tries to sniff the zeitgeist, cast his eyes towards the horizon and see where the energy of humanity and America is going, and then he tries to be that thing. That's the point of Mad Men, right? That was traditional, and that's what people in Hollywood used to do too in the pre-Harvey Weinstein era. I mean, Harvey Weinstein. Let us not say that Zionism did not do some good for this world, because I think when horrible people like him were in charge, he was like an apex predator that kept a lot of bad things in check in terms of creativity. He juiced more creativity out of the moribund Hollywood than ever could be expected, despite the whole degeneracy that he promoted at the same time. Okay, so that was what Hollywood did. That's what producers did. That's what marketers did back in the day. Is they sniffed the air, they matched the zeitgeist, and then they strode forward, and you'd follow them because you're cool. Modern people in Hollywood, they don't do that. All they do is they read charts and then they slavishly follow trends. Again, very feminine. The other thing they do is they try to create drama and they try to create branding. Like, you don't watch the new Star Wars because you like it. You watch the new Star Wars because the Star Wars is a brand. It is a product brand, and you are the person who likes the Star Wars brand. That's why you watch Star Wars. Or alternatively, Star Wars, the people who make the marketing product, they start a big drama campaign, and they make the trailer look extra woke, so you get super angry about it, so everyone gossips about you. I don't need to tell you how effeminate this is. This is the classic modes of feminine operation. You get status through following the popular girl, and by starting gossip campaigns, and by signaling to everyone else about how virtuous you are or how unvirtuous you are, and then use the drama to kind of pull yourself up the algorithm. That's what these people like Milo Yiannopoulos built their entire career on. Milo Yiannopoulos contributed zero new ideas to the right-wing space. All he did was create battles around himself and made himself the symbol of those battles. And then magically he became popular because of that. He'd throw out 100 accusations and, two of them would be right. And then because 2 out of the 100 accusations he made were accurate, people called him a prophet. This is not honorable. This is not masculine, but this is exactly what social media rewards. And one of the reasons why is that they're just sort of these testing mechanisms. This was something that Black Horse explained to me, and when he explained it, I immediately found that it rung true. There are sort of testing mechanisms that people put into place when you're in a physical space with somebody else. This is what I learned, at least, from being kind of a hopeless person with women to being kind of moderately successful, or I'd say very successful when I got my wife. I think I did very well for myself. She might be watching. Who knows? I love you, honey. Either way, what you learn as a man is that so much of how you do business is in how you hold yourself, how you kind of occupy space. And Black Horse's point was, okay, so let's say we have a bunch of these guys in a room and we're talking about something that we're planning to do. It comes out in the conversation and in how we hold ourselves, who kind of are the people who are forging ahead and who are actually being the leaders and who actually should be the leaders, and who are the people who are kind of more subordinate and who really should be taking orders. And this is something that is impossible to talk about in so many words. It's impossible to outline exactly in terms of art, although I will be doing this in this conversation. But it is everything about how you take discourse, which has become entirely feminized. So if we're just discussing who has high status, who knows how has high status? According to the internet, whoever is doing well on the algorithm, and the algorithm rewards trend chasing, and it rewards sycophancy, and it rewards drama. So sycophant, trend chasing, drama queens are the people who are highest status. But if you walk into a room with a bunch of sycophantic drama queens who chase trends, your human instinct will immediately alert you to the fact that these people are not high status. No, I haven't walked into the room with this person, but nobody. I can tell. I can tell. I can tell enough by watching his mannerisms among other people. Nobody would walk into a room with Milo Yiannopoulos and suddenly be struck by the fact that this person has a commanding presence of authority, and no one would, to pick one of the other troublemakers that's online these days. No one would walk into a room with the brown down market version of Milo Yiannopoulos, Basilian thought. Nobody would walk into a room with this person and be struck with the fact that this is the man that we need to have direct us towards a new way of conceiving, organizing, and leadership among dissident factions. That these people are very weak people. They don't command any respect. If you walked into a room with them, even a nerd like me, my presence would immediately overpower them. A good example, another good example here is Richard Hanania. This person is a person. He's made a name for himself online as being elite human capital. And I've never met the guy personally, but I'm going on a few friends who have, it's just people. He has. Oh, I'm so smart. I'm so high IQ. Everyone who's not me or not my friends, they're just slop merchants. They're just peasants. He and Nathan Kaufness. I don't know if Richard Hanania is fond of using the peasants derogatory, but Kaufman certainly is, and Hanani has his own set of words for these low-class, dumb, non-agentic people who are just low-class trash. You walk into a room with Kaufness or Hanania, according to my sources, these people just look like the weakest, most subservient nerds that you'll ever see. They feel degenerate. They feel like you could just push them right over. You would never take orders or commands from a person like this in real life. It would be impossible to maintain this charade. And that's important, right? Because these instincts inside male spaces, and Jordan Peterson very famously linked this with this idea that what we're sensing is kind of how we would take these guys in a fight. How would we take these guys in a fight? There's something to that, right? I mean, not to get on board with this too much. I'm kind of digressing, but bear with me here too. I mean, a fascinating phenomenon that I've written half an essay about, and I might publish it sometime in the future, is this absolute remarkable phenomenon of trans men, like women who become men. Because and there's a few interesting things about this. First of all, unlike trans women, there have for time immemorial there have been men, usually homosexual men, or I should say men with a proclivity for buggery and homosexual attraction, who have dressed up as women and who have castrated themselves and who have played the role of women in brothels and in escort services, or in what do they call them, the courtesanery in the ancient context, or whatever. There have always been those things. It is very, very rare for there to be a subset of rich women who decide that they're just going to become men. Sometimes it happens, as in the case of Joan of Arc, where women are trying to impersonate men in order to share in male privilege or male exclusive spaces in order to wield power or do something essential. There are very few women who just decide that they want to occupy male bodies and male modes just because it's the way they want to be. It's very rare. It's very rare to do. And the only time this ever occurs in a large, as a large scale phenomenon has been in the age of the internet. And the reason why it happens in the age of the internet is that these women have an understanding of masculinity that is entirely developed through fiction. It's entirely developed through images. It's entirely interfacing with Hollywood representations of men rather than men themselves. These women do not decide they want to be men by walking into a room full of bros and going, yep, I'm comfortable here. Like, these girls aren't walking into into male locker rooms as like they pal around with each other and they go, "Oh, if only I could stay in the male locker room forever. That's my happy space, is the male locker room at my high school. And I was horribly kept out of this." That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is they're going on fan fiction. They feel very uncomfortable with their own bodies. They go on these sort of fan fiction forums, these sort of lit erotica forums, where they read about men, usually gay men, and they develop this highly idealized version of gay men where your image is kind of like a Korean pop star. A Korean pop star is a great example of this. Korean men are not known internationally to be the best looking men. If you poll women about where the best looking men are, they usually point somewhere towards like Southern Europe, usually. Southern Europe, the kind of European, but still kind of masculine men who have kind of a very forward way of being. Sometimes Northern European men are listed as attractive. Korean men, if you look at dating app results of interracial relationships, again, women are more hesitant to engage in interracial relationships. Men tend to go for Korean men less. But if you talk to women on these forums, these fan fiction forums, because their relationship is entirely fictional, they think that Korean men are the most attractive in the entire world because they're watching like these Korean pop stars with like, facial surgery. And I'm not saying Korean men are unattractive. There is, I've always found that Asians, whether male or female, have kind of an elegant look to them. And, that is a thing, right? But for all the inherent beauty of the Asian face, classically speaking, Caucasian women have not been as fascinated by that when they've encountered it in real life as they have with men from other areas of the world. And most of the time, most women like sticking inside their own race and ethnicity, and for good reason. But if you go online, you'll have the subset of women that have convinced themselves that gay men, that Korean men, this is the height of what they want, and they're going to become that kind of man. And what they develop, what they turn into when they transition. These people have massive surgery, chest reconstruction surgery, and they sculpt all of like these pecs for themselves, and they look like a bunch of gay cowboys, and it looks kind of like, I don't know, I don't even know what it looks like. I want to say pornographic, even though I don't know what porno would look like. It looks bizarre. It looks bizarre, especially since as a guy, when you look at other men and you look at it with male eyes and not female eyes, you're looking at all these kind of like fake men with their fake sculpted abs, and you're just thinking to yourself, I could breathe on you and you would collapse in a fight. There's no way you could take me. Like I could just lean over and you'd fall. I could I could I could hit you playfully in the arm and you'd be running off to get first aid. You would never be able to hang with the kind of antics that we would get up to. You would have no way of kind of jostling and banting the way that most men do in locker rooms. You'd fall apart. All of this it's just real enough to sell a camera. It's not real enough to actually exist in the real physical world where there are these kind of messy realities that you need to maintain, where you actually do have to project will. And so, what you see online and what you see kind of winning out in these Twitter battles, it's like the trans man, like clavicular is the image. When we talk about, oh, well, we need to be good looking and we need to be kind of the internet, this idea that the internet is an idea space or a place to get data, that kind of got killed by COVID, generative AI, that definitely, that was really the end of it when we're flooded now with artificial content. It's hard to convince yourself that you're unique because you posted a lot when, machines are doing that for you faster than you ever could. So now we're in a new era, and the new era is all about appearance. It's all about being there. And clavicular is the icon of this. Clavicular is, again, exactly the kind of, again, people call him accurately And this sticks so well. He's a male on male transsexual. He's this artificial man. And when he says, "Well, I mog people. I look better than them. I humiliate them by being in their presence." Do you? Though? I'm sure you mog people on Instagram. I'm sure you mog people in the sense that your algo is getting driven more than theirs are. I don't believe for a second that that guy holds sway over anybody who's in his space with him. That is insane. This guy is just an absolute twink, and he's a walking joke. But this is what wins. In it's not reality. It's the social media's understanding of what reality is. And the same thing is true for right wing activism. You will have people who've done absolutely no organizing lecture you about what it takes to have a real fraternal organization work at a large scale. It's like professors lecturing birds on how to fly. You will have the most autistic people in the world suddenly become experts on what realism is, even though they have had no experience with politics in the real world. They have no deep kind of connection to any kind of business outlet or any kind of ability to talk to people outside their little small Discord server. Um, and again, because it's a sudden disconnection. We understand that real life is coming back in a sense, but we don't really have the art or the way of doing it authentically. And everything about the internet incentivizes that not to be the case. This is kind of the final transition that people, you know, if there was a starting point in this series, the Lenten Restoration series, we've talked about a variety of art forms that have kind of been eclipsed by the internet technology and they need to be kind of rediscovered. Our whole attitude about this or that are completely misguided. If there was a way to step out of the internet and into the real world, it would be learning kind of these private arts. And that's exactly, these are the arts that are kind of the quality of life arts. The problem is that nothing on the internet will ever be honest with you about this. It will always give you the internet's version of what is going on. Great, perfect. Windows 11 is trying to update. Brilliant. I need to completely go back to Linux, and I have this because of one program only. But the show must go on. Either way, the internet is never going to give people an honest understanding of what it means to kind of have an art of presence, because the algorithm benefits everything but having kind of a distinct art of presence. When we talk about these things, this is kind of a grab bag of all the things. We did music, we did literature, we did movies. Those were the great art forms. Poetry was also included in literature. The great art forms that existed before the internet era that got killed off. Now, tonight we're talking about the other foot, the social art forms. Clothing, food, mannerisms, conversations, even gaming. The art of consuming alcohol or not consuming alcohol. These are all things that everyone post-COVID knows that they need to get back. Again, if I were to kind of look back to my pre-internet, I'm an older millennial. I remember the pre-internet era. These were kind of the activities that characterize most of people's ordinary existences. Most people define themselves by how they ate and how they dressed and the third places they went to in between work and home. They define themselves through their religious activities and through their personal connections. And because of that, an enormous amount of care was given over to how you held yourself and how you conducted conversation. And all of that's completely lost. And the problem is what makes this additionally complicated, and I realize the supreme irony of saying this, is that every attempt to rediscover the private arts or the real life arts in an online context is going to be poisoned by influencer culture. Clavicular is, he's almost a parody. If I were to give men advice on the way that they could look good and hold themselves and make themselves appear strong, to friends and women, clavicular would be a study in its opposite. He, I mean, I guess I might get the stream banned, but he looks like a faggot. There's no other better word for this. That is the word. I mean, other than the fact that it means a burning pile of sticks. There's no other word for clavicular than that. And I don't know his sexuality, or not that sexuality is really even a thing, but that is what that is the internet's answer to trying to become present again in our own skins. Is let's find the fakest, most gay person who makes being attractive and healthy his thing, and then boost his algorithm up. Um, this is not, again, I mean, you can follow this. I mean, I guarantee you, clavicular is just the beginning of this. The internet is basically going to crest on this rock, the rock of the difference between the image of something and the reality of something, the simulation of something and its actual instantiation. And the crisis ultimately is that no simulation can ever be accurate. And no thing can ever be simulated perfectly. And moreover, that's sort of the macro problem. The more immediate problem with the internet is the incentives of being popular on the internet will always be at odds with genuinely cultivating a personality that works in real life, in private life. It's sort of the art of life's quality, as I said. Um, as I would put it, the critical thing about all of these more private arts that we talk about when we talk about dining and we talk about conversation is that they are the arts and the cultural elements that are reserved for people who are closest to us. As soon as it becomes parasocial, I think the incentive becomes kind of mangled. And I'm not so sure how to reconcile this. If we are going to be in public in the modern world, you are going to, in some sense, be recorded and put on the internet. And I know I'm kind of echoing the ancient Paleolithic fear that by even being photographed, a part of your soul is stolen. But the thing that sort of sets aside the things I'm going to talk about today is the fact that in order to be authentic, they need to be for people, and they need to be for people who are immediately in your presence. I've thought for a very long time about having some kind of dress code for the podcast. I'm not completely dismissing that idea. I've never been able to establish one, not simply for the reason that I'm in a room that has massively changing temperatures, that's very cold in the winter and very hot in the summer. I was thinking maybe I'll wear a sports jacket or something. It makes me look kind of heavy and it would be totally inappropriate for a summer. It just felt pretentious. It felt like I was trying to affect something. I think that in terms of all of these things, um, there's a sense that pretension is kind of the enemy of authenticity, kind of by definition. But really in the age of the internet, is this idea that, okay, you're walking into a room, you're wearing an interesting suit. You walk into a dinner party and your hostess is serving you a meal. You walk in, you attend a book group. You talk about a book you're reading. Uh, the ultimate question in all these interactions, or you play a game, right? What is this for? Right? Like who we're having this interaction, right? We're eating this meal. We're taking this walk. Um, we're having this conversation. Is this conversation for the edification of the people who are having this conversation, or is this conversation existing so that it can fuel a more important conversation that's happening in a group chat, that's happening in a social media feed? Are we reading this book because it looks good on Book Talk? Are we having this meal because the photos of it are going to go onto Instagram? I think that it needs to, the first thing to kind of overcome psychologically is that in real life is the first step. And the online world is kind of a reflection of that, and an inaccurate reflection. As soon as you experience something or somebody online, you know that you're experiencing something that is by definition inauthentic. It's a simulacrum of the thing. I might do this out of order, in fact. Well, let's get on to this. So, um, how should I put this? Everyone knows that I've come from a progressive community, and I liked watching breadtube or leftist YouTube videos for a very long time. And one of the reasons is I always felt that the leftist arty type in particular, I've always kind of loved art people. Theater kids a little less so. They're a little bit more grating. I think I have a friendship with Walt Bismarck. I did a podcast with him the other day. And the guy's a bad take factory. I'm not going to lie. But I like him. Like, I like his interesting takes. I like his zany attitude. He's entertaining. And more so even than the entertaining, zany theater kid, which is simultaneously talented and grating. Another artist type that I genuinely miss is the sad melancholic artist. And I could mention people here like Millennial Woes, who as soon as I heard Millennial Woes, I didn't agree with his politics, but I immediately knew based on how he talked that he was kind of a kindred spirit to a type that I was just not in contact with anymore because of the great divergence of social realities. There was a divide, and the people who were more realistic and had a handle on reality and had firm control over their emotions and who were sober understood that our society was heading for a catastrophe and bailed on the progressive project. But then the people who were, more suggestive, who were more agreeable, who might have had a few mental illnesses, who were kind of enthralled to an ideology, they got inevitably sucked down into the leftist fever swamp. And it's really is tragic. And I'm saying this because it happened to a lot of my friends, right? It happened to a lot of my friends. I don't talk about my friends on these podcasts as a rule, but luckily I can talk about YouTubers who kind of resemble some of the paths that I recognize from many of my friends who kind of got, and I shouldn't say sucked into a rabbit hole. That sounds kind of like the typical, they fell down a radicalization rabbit hole. That's not what happened. I'm the one that jumped into the hole. I believe that hole was an escape hatch. They were on a course that college put them on. College and grad school and even professional life as mediated by California Human Resources Department. It had a certain path for people to be comfortable progressives, a path that looked like crack.com and old Reddit and all of this stuff. And these people, they just stayed on the path. And this involved essentially a lot of self-humiliation from what I could see if you were a white man. The number of white men who became women over this period was enormous. It wasn't quite as bad as the attrition rate on BreadTube, but it was, in my friend group, it was actually kind of remarkably high. The men who developed either non-binary or some sexuality-based identity that made them not straight or not cis. I hate using those words, but that's how they describe themselves. They left cis straightdom in some capacity so that they could exist in the diversity, intersectionality island with the rest of their friends and have good standing. But the problem is that in this process, we lost a lot of the sort of sensitive souls that were kind of, I don't know how I want to put this. They were kind of an essential component of seeing, of kind of talking in very authentic and spiritual ways. It sounds bizarre saying this, right? Because when I think of breadtubers, I think of PhilosophyTube and I think of ContraPoints. And PhilosophyTube is a complete hack and a complete fraud. And, I don't know if anything needs to be said about that. They're just fake all the way through. ContraPoints, not by contrast completely. How should I put it? ContraPoints is an authentic fake. they know that they're performing for the camera. You can feel in any ContraPoints video, the camera has a more distinct presence in the room than the personality it is capturing. You could almost feel that there was a ContraPoints video. I didn't even think I watched it this time. They release one every year, and in it, the camera, it feels like you can just see the camera beating down the person that is Natalie Wynn to the point where they're kind of caught back. They're almost kind of being blown back by the force of the audience's judgment. The ContraPoints is extremely aware of this, and they're totally caught up in this, and for that reason, they're not very authentic. The ContraPoints turned on the camera and became a slave to the camera, and has been desperately trying to feed the audience what it wanted for nigh on 3 years now. And they've made a lot of money, but they're totally unsuccessful, and it looks like they've completely had their soul drained away by the social media algorithm, if I do say so myself. But on the smaller creators, here's a very interesting thing. I have this one video here from this minor channel called Let's Talk About Stuff. And I always found this channel really interesting because, again, total shitlib, total communist. I have some respect for Marxists, but very much washed along with the progressive college perspective on the universe. They eventually found their way to socialism because that's where it was all pointing, obviously, whether it worked or not. And of course, naturally, they transitioned, right? But you would get these incredible these video confessions from them that were way too honest for the era of YouTube that they were making. Nothing is more contrived than the ContraPoints or Philosophy Tube video. But this person, Let's Talk About Stuff, would make these incredibly honest confessions about their transition and their feelings about the world. And they would be edited, and they would be, in many ways, staged. So this was an artificial product, to be sure. But the emotion coming out of it was like really sincere. And I mean, it was almost horrifying to say, because it was really, the story of a very sensitive artist person who had a very weak constitution and a very difficult ability to resist social forces, just not being able to stand up for themselves in the wake of what their community was telling them, in the wake of what they thought were these desires to be something that they couldn't possibly be. And they just got swept along it with this, like a twig in a flood, like a stick in the deluge, so to speak. And initially, like all people, Let's Talk About Things, I think they called themselves Sarah Zadig or whatever. That's the name on the tin. That's the assumed name of the artist. They had the height right before COVID. During COVID, everything fell apart. They make a comeback 4 years later, and they say this thing that always stuck with me. they do this video log where, again, it's like this long confession, and the artist says, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I just hate being perceived. So again, this person, they're doing a video log, and they're doing it on the streets of Seattle, which is the city I used to live in, right downtown near Pike's Place Market. This is just after COVID, so that area is still a little bit vacant. But every time people come by them, they turn off the camera, and they have to restart it, and the person incorporates in their confession the deep insecurity they have of a group of people walking by them, seeing them in real life. And they say, I hate being perceived. I just was just gobsmacked by this. I think I've mentioned it at least 4 times on these streams. I will never get over this phrase, I hate being perceived, from a video artist who for the past 5 years was confessing every intimate detail of their entire lives into the camera, including surgically altering their bodies. And every part of that's documented in high resolution media. Yet they hate being perceived. And when they say I hate being perceived, they mean I hate being perceived in real life in a way that does not go through the camera. Right? It's not go through the camera. I mean, they're recording this video of themselves post COVID in Seattle for the internet consumption. That's not perception. That's their canvas. When people in the middle of the most busy, highly trafficked neighborhood in Seattle, when a group of people walks by them, that is being perceived because you have to occupy someone else's reality and interact with them. Suddenly, your animal spirits are battling against the other animal spirits of the people who are there in the room or the park there with you. And there's this moment where you kind of feel each other in a real sense that's not digitally edited. And you can see what kind of people you are, how serious you are, what you're doing here. And very few people who do YouTube or do any of this internet stuff, myself included, I think I'm certainly better than most other creators, or on the left, certainly. I don't know. I think there are a bunch of people. Carl Benjamin is one of those people who is able, the energy and presence he has in his videos is exactly the energy and presence that he brings to his real life persona. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of the British creators are more like that. They very much have they're less detached than the Americans, including myself. I'm a perfectly gregarious person in real life. Usually, I have to run away from events early because I've only allocated like 3 hours for them. But this is the thing, like the perception. That's what people fear. They're running away from the confrontation with these kind of deeply organic spirits because they're afraid that it will reveal something, that they won't be able to live in the shadow reality anymore. I think that's the problem. That's the problem with creators, is that every time when you're in reality, you feel that in many ways, somehow, and maybe this is a blessing that I'm kind of small, right? You always feel that the persona you play on the internet is bigger and more important and more real than the physical matter that's walking around in everyday life. And you're afraid that if you can concede to the relevance of this interaction that we're having in real life, then the importance of your online persona is going to kind of, and maybe you're an insecure person when the camera's turned off. Maybe you don't fill up the room with conversation. And so if you concede that the interaction we're having is relevant and meaningful and happening in the moment, then you kind of lose the power that the internet gave you. You went on the internet, you found your voice, you found your power, you command whatever small fraction of the total algorithmic volume that you have. And now when you're being perceived by other people who walk into the room, that value system is being questioned by the value system that's being imposed upon you by circumstance. I don't think that there's any way to any kind of authentic art without rediscovering the importance of perception in those sort of unregulated physical moments between people. That's what made early internet culture so powerful and late internet culture so meaningless. Even though we have all these great tools to generate memes, no one can produce anything because no one has those actual encounters. This encounter with this other entity that is not a figment of your algorithm. You cannot block them. You cannot cancel their window. You cannot veto them out of reality. You have to confront this person. There was always I never really liked Dungeons and Dragons very much, but I remember for about 3 or 4 years when I was in junior high school, I was really into this idea that I'd set up a campaign. I never got a campaign through more than 2 or 3 adventures with my friends. We lacked the attention span. But I remember reading and rereading and rereading the Dungeon Master's Guide. And there was this point in it this is, I think, second or third edition, where the Dungeon Master's Guide says, do not confuse an encounter with a fight. So they say something like, here is, a campaign is a series of encounters. That's what the Dungeon Master Guide said. And they said, like, this is an example of an encounter. And they give this long chain where this party encounters this strange, bubbling, chaotic vapor. They follow it. It consumes a village. They chase it down into the mountains. They confront it. They try to fight it, and then it escapes. That's an encounter, right? That's an encounter. What's not an encounter is the party. The party runs into a pack of orcs, and they cut them to ribbons, and they get 5 experience. That is not an encounter. Another thing that's not an encounter. A party of player characters falls through a trapdoor, and they fight a golden dragon, and the golden dragon just incinerates them in 5 seconds. That's not an encounter. An encounter has to provide the party with something that is challenging and that provides them with a series of choices for which the choices will have some meaningful impact on the course of life from that point onward. And the choices cannot just be vetoed by some optimized decision to exit. This has to in some sense be forced upon them by it can't be something that's happening in the background, and there can't be an easy way around it. That is what an encounter is in Dungeons and Dragons, and that's what an encounter is in the real world. The idea of being perceived by other people. You have to be faced with another person. You can't be able to veto it or escape into some kind of optimized or pre-programmed behavior. It can't be a way where you just press a button and do your typical thing and it results in the same kind of reward, the same Skinner box reward you got last week. You have to make a decision, and the decision has to change the course in some small way of who you are. That is what an encounter is. That is what being perceived implies in the real world. And it's those experiences, those frictionful experiences, that are what gives life its magnitude, and what more than anything else the social media algorithm tries to dissuade us against. I'm going to do these slides kind of out of order. I'll do this way. This is something that I wrote about recently, a few months ago, towards the end of summer of 2025. I will talk about my vices. Let's talk about my vices. My number one vice, I would say, I don't know. I mean, God can tell me. Probably pride is my number one vice. Probably, lustful thoughts are a greater vice than that. Or I don't know. But of the qualities that I talk about publicly, my own sins be remembered. But of the things that I have as part of my public profile that I'm kind of least proud about, it's my appreciation of like nerdy board games. And I wrote an article about some of my favorite ones. Of course, there's the Euro games that everyone plays, the strategy games like Axis and Allies or Twilight Imperium that are a little bit more of a persuasion for the more rarefied set, shall we say. And then you get into kind of like the deep nerd board games like Android Netrunner or Magic the Gathering, or one of my personal favorites, Blood Bowl, like the fantasy football game with the miniatures. I love playing these games. And so this takes me, not infrequently in adult life, when I was a kid, when I was in college, I just play with friend groups, right? I wanted to play Axis and Allies or Magic the Gathering or whatever, Netrunner or Illuminati. I want to play it. I'd have a friend group in high school or college, and we would just play the game at somebody's house. Or in a more fun sense, we would play at this old dingy coffee bar that I really liked, that just let you sit there forever. This is before the era of Starbucks. You could buy a shitty drip coffee and sit there as a high schooler for an entire Saturday and knock out a game of Axis and Allies or Illuminati. It was amazing. But that was the context. You get these games from comic book stores. Comic book stores back in the day doubled as these fancy game stores as well. They're like one-stop shop hobby stuff. But in adulthood, when I want to indulge this vice about myself, these days I have to literally get a babysitter, which makes it prohibitively expensive and something that I don't do very much anymore. But let's say that I do indulge. I have a birthday coming up, so I'm an adult. You have to go to game stores to play these games reliably. They have Euro game nights. They have Magic the Gathering nights. They have, well, if you're really lucky, they have Blood Bowl nights. You have to go to these game stores. I feel that you could write an entire novel about, not novel. Well, maybe you could write a novel like Clerks, but with game stores. I always remember the Spoonie one, Noah Antweiler, who's one of my chief inspirations for internet content creation, did this old script that was called FLGS, which is Friendly Local Game Store or Failing Local Game Store, where it was a story about him working at a game store. And it was kind of like, Gen Xer that he is. It was a variation on Kevin Smith's Clerks, albeit, more updated for modern sensibilities, and in the context of doing something that was at the time highly specialized. Modern game stores are just this travesty of adulthood. How should I describe them? Everything about them is wrong. And I'm not saying this. The problem is, I don't want to cast. I have very fond memories of a few FLGSs in New Jersey and in California and in Seattle. I know that you have to do this. I know that you have to do this in order to succeed. I'm not faulting you as a businessman. If you are doing this as a owner of a game store, you are playing the game right because this is how you get your money. But they feel like giant adult toy stores. They do not feel like any place where adults should be. And I know that maybe adults shouldn't play board games at all. And then there's a case for that. Maybe I should just be restricting myself to bridge. But quite frankly, the only people who play bridge are people who are 30 or 40 years older than me. They're all boomers. And they're at, they're either at their mansions that they bought for $20,000 dues back in 1979, or they're at care homes right now playing bridge. And I don't really feel like crashing that scene. So if I want to shuffle up cards, it's going to be at one of these FLGSs. They feel like adult toy stores. Everything about the Friendly Local Game Store is optimized to get you to buy product and get excited for next product. I have kind of the backdrop of this. And so you have this big store. And back in the day, when you had these big stores, the tables and the playing areas would be central. And all of the stuff, the products would be off to the side. Now, modern stores are a lot larger, so sometimes they have both areas. But everything about the Friendly Local Game Store is just this product, these products. And all of the products are not about actually using the products to play a game. They're about participating in a kind of brand identity, like the brand identity that is Warhammer. Now, I painted an army of Warhammer figurines in COVID. They're still on my shelf. Unlike Blood Bowl, I've played that game maybe once 4 years ago. It's fun. It was fun to paint them up, whatever. But everyone I talk to who's a Warhammer fan, the identity is kind of a brand identity. It's the identity of the brand. Or Magic the Gathering. This is a game that you can go in for a draft night. It's cheaper than a movie at this stage, and it's a lot more fun. But one of always the big problems is everything in the store is organized around the product, and nothing about it is organized around the people. And when you play against the people at the store, whether it's Euro games or Magic the Gathering or whatever, they're just trying, you are there. You, the person who's playing against them, is there as a sideshow to their relationship, their real relationship, which is their relationship with the consumer product. And this is so perverse. And I don't really know what to do, because you couldn't, and this is why I don't blame store owners for doing this. I don't blame store owners for not making their environment more adult oriented or less focused on consumers and collectibles. But and obviously, when you look at a game like Magic the Gathering, it is a game that is being devoured by its own collectability. And as famously stated by Richard Garfield, he said, Magic the Gathering is a game first and a collectible second. If ever it becomes a collectible first, the game will die. And sure enough, Hasbro is turning it into a collectible first and the game's dying. That's not really the subject here, but if this were an adult activity that we were engaging in, the way that people used to play bridge or poker, I don't see any reason why you couldn't substitute out bridge with Settlers of Catan or whatever, or, Dominion or Netrunner even, if I had my druthers for games. No reason you couldn't do that. But you couldn't, because if the product receded into the background, we would actually be staring at each other. And truth be told, nobody likes each other very much in this community. There are some exceptions. I've known some Blood Bowl playing groups who, everyone is they're all really good friends. They're all, it's very tight knit. There are some exceptions. There are some Magic the Gathering groups that play with each other and they all use house rules. That's how it should be. But everything else around the failing local game store, your opponents are just there so that you can, feel the tactile nature of the cards, so you can add to your collection. The event is just happening so that the store will be able to get a discount on product that comes from Hasbro and be the first person to sell the latest Pokemon boondoggle to people who immediately scalp it on eBay. That is what the experience is. The experience of going into an FLGS in 2026 as an adult is everything about the experience says that you're an adult child trying to live out their adolescence in this store. There is no space to feel like an adult in a friendly local game store. And B, you're a secondary thing to the real star of the show, which is the corporate product that is being put on offer for you to buy. I don't know how to diminish sort of the business logic of this, because again, I don't have an alternative business model that could possibly work. People are far too atomized. But I will say this, in order for board games to no longer be a guilty pleasure of mine and just be an ordinary adult pleasure of mine, there would have to be a way to cultivate them around the people playing them, so that you're not really cultivating the interaction with the product, but you are actually there to build an experience of the game with people. The game exists for man. Man does not exist for the game. The game is not some alternative way to get meaning in this world. Although part of me wonders with these things like miniature and collectible card games, whether or not the pathology, people, it's abusive. You have this relationship with this abusive consumer product, and it feels like the abused wife syndrome. You're there because you like the abuse. You want to be abused by Wizards of the Coast, because by being abused by Wizards of the Coast, you show how much you care about the product. And so the more abuse you accept, the bigger fan you are. And that's why you eat shit from Games Workshop and from Wizards of the Coast. There's that dimension of that. But let's say that we put that aside, and I just really like the game Blood Bowl, or I really like the game Dominion. I just want to play it with my friends. I just want to have a third place on a Friday evening where, maybe on the off chance that I get free or very cheap babysitting, I can go and have an escape from the workaday life. And hypothetically, you could set the store up so that you could have real adult interactions there, so that you wouldn't feel just like a tool for consumerism, so that the game revolved around the person and the perception of the person. I think these days we use the game as kind of a shield for us. This is the thing. Everything about culture is man's confrontation with himself. But the problem here is that everything about modern culture is just erecting barriers to doing that, right? Um, and the same thing is true again. I speculate to myself like, what wouldn't an adult? I told this to my wife. And I told this to other friends. Like, can you imagine what design a game store for people our age? Okay, so all the games are in the back. If you want to buy or request one or browse, there's a special room that you can go into to browse the games and to look through their stock. It's all behind the counter. And everything else about the it's just really nice chairs, polished tables, polished lacquer wood tables, nice sets of dice. Maybe they serve beverages, they serve wine. It's like a wine bar. You can get a glass of wine or a cup of tea. I'm always a big fan with tea with my games. Gaming is never really the same, and the fact that you can't have tea in one of these failing local game stores when you're playing something like Netrunner is like, that's a big detraction from my experience there. Okay, it's like you serve tea and wine and spirits, and people aren't so autistic about the collectability of the things they're playing with. I don't know. Maybe they've really like sleeved the hell out of their decks or whatever, or they're just not spurgs. You're not breaking anything that you wouldn't lose or that wouldn't be compensated by your adult interlocutors at the table. And then you just have like a very friendly set of games and experiences. And you grow in your understanding of the strategy of the game and your appreciation of the craft. Maybe if there's an artistic component to deck building or army crafting, there's time to appreciate that as well. And you could see like you could build it into an experience. It wouldn't be a very financially lucrative one, but you could do it. You could almost visualize that. Um, for the time being, that's going to have to be restricted to people's domiciles. People are going to have to rediscover the art of what it means to have a good, mature game, I think, in people's houses, because the incentive is all in the opposite direction. The incentive is always, always, always to push in the direction of just getting lost in the sauce of the consumer product. I think, there's a similar kind of conversation to go on over, clothing. I think this is sort of the challenge. We've kind of partially been able to overcome this. This is one thing that from the beginning of things like the OGSA or the various conferences we've done through Seldings, the dress code has been the most important thing that we could implement, and it has been the best thing we've been able to do. Clothing in the modern world is seen in our culture as being the purview of the gay, the fake, and the effeminate. And to be quite honest, 20 years of social media has done nothing to disabuse people of that perception. Clothing has never been more gay or more effeminate than it is right now. But when you think about it, clothing is the most masculine of all concerns. It is how you hold frame. As I wrote a essay and review of Sartor Resartus, Carlyle's masterpiece on, again, it's a parody of Hegel, or it's a parody of German idealism. It's part of a portrait of the artist as well. But the conclusion, I spent an egregious amount of time writing this because I had to write it in the language of Thomas Carlyle. That was one of my challenges. But really one of the secrets of clothing is that it is supposed to be a promise. It is supposed to be, you're supposed to present yourself aspirationally as what are you trying to do when you enter into this room and you're clothed. Based on how you're clothed, based on how you present yourself, you are providing for the people in your vicinity a promise of the kind of person you are. Now, if you're dressed like me in a t-shirt with like give up on life pants or jeans, that's basically the promise of no promises. But when you come wearing a suit, the promise is that you are, in the loosest term, a gentleman. You are someone who is playing a certain role in society. You're not riffraff. You have invested in this event. You have invested enough in this event, the place that you are right now, to spend a not insignificant amount of time getting ready for it and putting a certain amount of care into how you come off and how you make other people feel. The famous statement, the clothing is seen as a vain endeavor. But what could be less vain than putting investment into how you appear to other people? You aren't looking at, I mean, if you are on social media, then you are looking at yourself, and it is maybe an exercise in vanity. If you're a woman, and and no offense to the fairer sex here, but we all know how women view the world, right? There's that meme where the man looks at the world and he sees the world, and the woman, when she looks at the world, she looks at the world through a mirror. And so when she looks at the world, the mirror reflects back, and then she's in the picture with the world around her. That's why when men, that the meme is, men take a picture of the object, it's just the object. Women take a picture of the object and it's their face next to the object in a selfie. And the same thing, the same meme is like, why do women always get POV wrong? They always say POV, POV when you're a diva, and their POV has them in the POV. They don't understand what first person perspective is. They think first person perspective contains them inside of it because they're looking into a mirror and seeing themselves. So if you're a woman, naturally, the clothing you wear is not in your point of view. When you're a woman, you kind of always are looking at yourself and looking at others see yourself, and that image you have in the mirror is permanently imprinted on your brain. There is a reason why the symbol for male is the shield and spear of Mars, and the symbol for female is the circle and cross of Venus's mirror. Women are defined by the mirror, and therefore, not necessarily, I'm not saying that all women who put effort into their appearances are vain, far from it. There's an element of charity to that. But when women put effort into their appearance, there's always the possibility of vanity. When straight men put effort into their appearance, it is almost always kind of an act of charity. What you're doing is saying, I'm putting effort into presenting myself in a certain way. Maybe not charity. Charity is too charitable. Charity is the wrong word. When men put effort into their appearance, it is a statement of purpose, of will. It is a statement that you are about to undertake something. You're about to put your will into the world and mold the world in your image. And this get up, whether it is a suit, whether it is a lapel pin, whether it is some other object that marks you out, this is something that you need, that is there to symbolize this effort. In Asian movies, in Japanese movies in particular, if you watch anime, I used to watch anime, and the hero this is always a trope. They're about to do some undertaking. What's the first thing they do? They like put on the bandana, right? And the bandana has like some significant Japanese characters along the top, or maybe a symbol on the front. It symbolizes their will to undertake the task. Like they're going to do this. They put the symbol on their head to prepare themselves, and then they're completely Zen focused on their mission. They're ninja focused on their mission. I shouldn't say ninja focused. That sounds horribly 80s, but you know what I mean, right? They have the sole Zen focus on accomplishing their task. They're of one mind. That is what the clothing embodies. That purpose needs to be extended in our practice of clothing in the real world. I think formal clothing for events is kind of a first step. The next step, obviously, is for people who are not progressives to take certain affectations that mark them apart. And this is sort of what the gay community did with, you can tell that I talk about this, people always assume that either I have some horrible past that I'm restraining. In reality, it has come from the Bay Area. And so people, for some reason, every straight man in the Bay Area or in Seattle has heard the various stories about how gay men demarcated themselves from straight men. But for instance, like having handkerchiefs in pockets was something that the gay community did to mark itself as different. That is the obvious next step for people who are not progressive, is to take certain images, certain elements of clothing and make them our own. This is a large undertaking, but what's so funny is that it literally could be started by anybody. Any of the OGC chapters could undertake this and make it a thing. I've tried to introduce some traditions or habits that the OGC could undertake that they could use to make their events more memorable, but really to sort of mark out the purpose that we're all sharing in. It's little things like that, and the higher investment it is, and what we would ideally want is something that looks innocuous, but is very hard to get and very hard to pull off properly. And I guess you couldn't really do the same thing that the gay community did and just have handkerchiefs or whatever. But those little things, they would go miles and miles, some way I should say, to getting people more focused on purpose and setting themselves aside from other people. The man who promises nothing fulfills nothing. There's always that kind of dual danger, as Carlyle points out. The dual danger is the slob and the dandy. The dandy is somebody who, in his clothing, promises everything and delivers nothing. He shows that he's a gentleman. He's not a gentleman. He shows that he's highly refined. He's actually a cultural ignoramus. And everything's kind of a joke. Everything's like a joke. Oh, I'm just pretending to be this thing. And the appearance is the thing for the dandy. In modern days, we would call a dandy a fag. Or I already said the word on stream. I might as well say it again. I don't care, YouTube. You can ban my channel. You can you're already demonetizing me. I can see you're already deboosting me in the algorithm. So you might as well go. Maybe I'll just have to reconfigure my social media so I go primarily through Rumble. I think it probably is time to do that. Yeah, someone says in the chat, pocket watches. I have an old gold pocket watch that was given to me by my great uncle on my mother's side, the very old school person. I can't remember if they were from New Jersey or San Francisco. So funny that it feels like everyone in my family goes through two states, New Jersey and California. Invariably, it's always the same two states, at least on the American side. It's very unusual that way. Either way, I digress. Pocket watches would be fine. I never take that pocket watch out because it's super delicate. And last time I did, it got the glass got cracked, which is not a big deal. You get it replaced, but it sets you back a fair amount for a jeweler to replace the glass when it gets cracked. And of course, you constantly have to wind it up because the thing is it's like 120 years, 130 years old at this stage. Like it came from like Mark Twain era San Francisco. I don't know, something like, but that's not a bad idea, right? It's not a bad, maybe watches, maybe like old analog watches. You could, right now I think everyone's doing lapel pins. That might be kind of a good start here. But I digress. It is all these things. The dandy promises everything and fulfills none of his promises. The slob that dresses like I'm dressed here right now, gray t-shirt, Mark Zuckerberg, the Mark Zuckerberg gray t-shirt with the Mark Zuckerberg patented jeans. I promise nothing and I deliver on my promise. I don't like to think that I am that person. I don't think that I promise nothing and deliver on my promise. But that's sort of like, that's what we've come to expect in the era of being slobs. Everyone's kind of goblin mode. Everyone's kind of feral. It's psychologically stressful to be in a society where everyone is just dressed down. Like, I don't owe you anything is what everyone's outfit says. Just one marker, just one lapel pin, just one pocket watch or one handkerchief if you wanted to copy the gays. That would be revolutionary. That would say, I don't promise nothing. I promise a very, very select group of people something quite profound that you don't understand. Doing that asserts power over places in public, and in private places, it establishes a mode of doing business. I was thinking about third places and all this, and this is the challenge. I want to go on to my final thing at a certain point this evening about dining and the art of conversation. These are two of the same things. Um, Third places are hard these days. I was going to loop this into gaming. The game store, I've already gone out linked about how horrible it is. The other one that I spend a lot of time with now is the gym. I'm now that it's sunny, I'm trying to take up tennis again with my wife, and we're kind of dragging the son along. He's going to his activities. We're doing ours. It's horrible to interact. Gym culture is just terrible. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. There's two worlds. There's the world of like the rich boomers, where it feels like you're locked out of their country club or their specific little clique of pickleball players, or you're in with a bunch of like 20 something guys that are Zoomers or younger millennials that are probably in some odd way, broadly ideologically simpatico to my point of view, but at the same time, just in a different mode of their lives. The gym is. It's not a good third place. It's just not. I mean, a gym is. It's necessary. It's necessary to have the equipment. It's necessary to play tennis. It's necessary to go there and do things with other people. Um, it's necessary to exercise as a group, right? People who do late weightlifting regimes in solo tend to fail. People who do them with a group of friends tend to succeed. And I don't, needless to say, sports, almost all sports need to be done with other people. It's just that simple, right? It's just that simple. You need to do sports with other people in order to do sports well, or I mean, or at all, really. I don't know. There's probably some solo sport. There's solo pickleball, solo squash. I'm sure I've heard of that. But it defeats the whole point. But gyms aren't meant. First of all, gyms are not meant to be gender mixed spaces. I hate that. I think there should be separate male and female gyms. And I think this whole idea of trying to develop etiquette in exercise spaces between the sexes is meaningless. We don't even use the same equipment. We don't play in the same leagues. We shouldn't have the same buildings. Just have a dual membership option. I guess with me and my wife, we both play tennis together. So I can't say that we should be totally separated, because if I didn't have my wife, I wouldn't have a person to play tennis with. I wouldn't have a doubles partner in the event that we play couples. So you can't completely segregate it, but for the most part, it should be. But second of all, it just can't be a proper place where people socialize. You do sports and then you socialize afterwards. That has to be the pattern. Just like, regardless of how we were discussing the famous Seattle establishment, Third Place Books, this is the famous Seattle book chain that was developed by a guy who had read that book about third spaces. And what's funny is that establishment was developed in the early 2000s, at least. Maybe it was even the 90s. People have been trying to create third spaces way before people were talking publicly about the lack of third spaces, spaces that are not your home or your workplace. But bookstores don't work for the same reason that they fail, for the same reason that the FLGS fails, the failing local game store. They're places where you buy things, even if they're kind of done right in the used bookstore mode, where like they're at my dad's old bookstore, where they're just like literally a pile of old tomes, and you walk in like some scene from the Ninth Gate, and you're looking through all of these archaic books. My father's bookstore was never that dusty, but he always wanted to do something like that. Even classic bookstores are not a social space, and modern bookstores are a place for moving consumer products or craft beer. I hated Powell's in Portland. I hated Third Place Books. I thought it did both things poorly. Instead of having a third place where you could socialize and a bookstore where you could find interesting books, you put them together, and now you have a place where you can neither find interesting books, in the case of Powell's because it's too large, in the case of Third Place Books because the selection is too small, and then you have, stapled to that, a shitty third place where there's never enough seating, and the people who are sitting down there are all pretentious book snobs who you'd never want to interact with to begin with. Third places have to be places where human interactions can take place in their most primal form. And their most primal form is always through dining, through libations or drink, and through conversation. And this is kind of like, this is the place, this is the thing that needs to be rebuilt. All of these things need to be patterns of existence. And they're patterns of existence that we have in the intervening years lost. And this is very difficult. Like I said before in a live stream several years back now, I did more dinner parties when I was in my 20s than I do now in my early 40s. It's amazing when you think about it. This should be the time when I do dinner parties, but no one is really up for having them. There is not really a demand for people to come over. And this is sort of where I think people need to start in all the dimensions. Obviously, I think that people want to revive cooking culture, the culture of dinner. You can't do it online. You can't focus on the food. You have to focus on the event. You have to focus on the table. You have to focus on the physical place where people sit down. You can't focus on the taste. You have to focus on the feeling of being welcome in the space and sharing in experiences together. And all of those kind of awkward places, I think most people have had their most awkward moments in their entire lives at dinner parties. And everybody without exception, I know, has remembered at least one dinner party where they felt like they just had to go. Like my boss used to have dinner parties at his house. I hated eating dinner with my boss. I hated that more than anything else. Why would I want to sit down for dinner with somebody who I have a purely mercenary relationship with? I mean, the company made it very clear that my relationship with this person was purely mercenary. So why am I mixing this with some kind of spontaneous celebration of food and camaraderie? Especially since you can't talk shop at the dinner table. What else am I supposed to be talking about? Sports? I mean, maybe that's something to talk. I mean, that sports is kind of a good topic of conversation, generally speaking, but not when there's so many other things that divide us, like religion and politics. We don't even live in the same place. I just hate those things. But there is a dimension to which all modes of sitting down and having conversations with people, there's always a mode of friction to it. Whenever you go to a conference, like one of our groups, when you ever go to a basket weaving event, there is always this kind of awkwardness and this kind of, feeling like you're being perceived. You have to kind of negotiate the mode that you're going to engage people with in this moment. And because of that, there always is this little friction and awkwardness. That's what you have to kind of appreciate and kind of walk into. One of the big battles that we have right now, at least in my own life, is everyone around me I've landed in kind of a non-poor place in the kind of I've landed in I'm not by any stretch of the imagination wealthy, but I've landed in the non-poor side of the millennial generation, aka I have a house in a non-crime ridden area, and because of that, everyone around me is complete boomers. I can only live a quality life here if I kind of hold space and learn how to have these dinner parties where me and the boomers sit down at a table and kind of exist with each other in a mode of common conversation, in a mode of negotiation. I say that I could do nothing about the Iran war because there's nobody who I know who's really for it. I bet a bunch of the boomers on my block are, and I'm not going to be able to convince them. But I think that by having them in a space that I hold and control and dominate, I'm using dominate very loosely here, dominate in the mode of total hospitality and charity, I've sort of taken a step to ruling, to being a leader, to guiding people in a better way. And just kind of participating in a space that has hope that's outside of this fake environment we're in. I thought to myself, I've never been, well, I guess in college I was a big aficionado of beer and craft brewing because, it was the 2000s and that's what you did. You drunk beer with a lot of hops in it, a lot of it. But I always thought, well, maybe I should really get into wine. I live in wine country after all, where I'm right next to vineyards. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be sort of a stepping stone, a way to kind of bridge the generational divide and to make the dinner party some place where thoughts kind of flowed more regularly, where you could experience life and tap into the sense of life that you can't get from the online world. You can't have a virtual tasting. You can't have, I mean, I guess you can have a discussion about brands and about the subtleties of what goes into horticulture and all that. But it's not meaningful without the actual physical action of the toast. And maybe that's a component of it. These arts that kind of need to be revived. The art of small talk. I hate small talk. I'm really, really bad at it. And I can't do it anymore. I'm struggling. Actually, one of those reasons why I'm having this series is to hopefully help myself get small talk. I've been trying to develop something to talk with to my relatives for the longest time. We used to talk about movies. We used to talk about music. No one does that anymore because music and movies suck. And everything else is political. But small talk is not something that just dies. If small talk dies, then the dining table dies. If the dining table dies, then a spirit of private art has died, and we're deprived of a mode where we can build real relationships. Just bring it full circle. All of these spurgs who are creating these idiotic fights on Twitter come back every week and there's a new fight with new gay fake drama brought in fresh. If I had those people around a table with a glass of wine, all of this drama would be instantly resolved. It would be resolved within 5 seconds. This was one of the great revelations of the original OGC conference that we had back in 2022. We brought a lot of people together and they all had these little fake internet debates, wars between pagans and Christians. I don't want to downplay the importance of religion, quite the opposite. Personal dramas over sexual ethics. The second we were sitting around the table saying, okay, what are we going to do productively? All of that drama disappeared instantly. It was dissolved by the moment, the force of the personalities. And that's it. That is the beginning. Events like that in our lives are the beginning of an organic experience of the world that is the subject of all art. And the fuel that needs to happen before you can create novels or music or anything else like that. The struggle with other personalities and the soul against itself and emotive reflection is the fuel of all that. And it has to be cultivated, or it's just going to be endless Twitter drama until, World War IV or V happens and we all get wiped out by God knows what mind-bending technology is on the horizon. I think this is where I'm going to end this series. We'll do super chats. The link is in the description here, or entropy chats here. Thank you for joining me on this Lenten journey. Obviously, I'm not going to do it for Holy Week. Or wait, my God, are we in Holy Week? This is. I have my things. Maybe we could be. I have my days mixed up. I am, man, it has been a crazy week. So so it is April 5th. Okay. So next, I am correct. Next week is Holy Week. And we will be celebrating then. I don't know if I'm going to be streaming. Maybe I'll do something. I think you've probably seen enough of me, but maybe we'll see what popular demand requires. I'll be back the week after with a typical Fiddler's Green podcast. We'll discuss all about discourse and all that. But I hope, when I look at the YouTube channel and the fact that YouTube is predictably dying now and my channel with it, when I reflect on the fact that it's been 10 years to the day that I've been doing that I've been kind of interacting with discourse online, all that really remains is what I can impart to you in your real lives, what I can give to you. I can give you my takes on political events. I can give you my insight on cultural happenings. I can certainly give you my opinion on Twitter drama. But this series of the revival of books and literature and music and personal life and all this stuff, people in the comments, they complain about how me not liking Sanderson or me not liking this movie or that is a sign of my horrible taste. I mean, who cares? That's not the point of these things. My point is to give you the best insight I have for the future of human culture and a way that it could continue to exist. I'm trying to give you the best that I have in the most honest way that I can give it to you. Obviously, the series is not as popular as the stuff on politics, but I think that for whatever reason, this is needed. And so I'd like to thank you for joining me for this 4-week series. And I hope that you have a happy Holy Week. And with that, I think I'll sign off. I should say I'll sign off after I do the Enderbeat chats. So, guys, thank you again for joining me. And looks like there's aren't very many of them this week, which is fair enough. I know I'm doing this every week, so this might be short. Although I might pause a little bit just to give space. I will maybe rant a little bit about Twitter drama. I'm so tired of these personality fights between various people on X. It's just totally meaningless. Also, sort of these like fights, Substack is dominant, or X for me, is dominated by fights in between different factions of the right. So it's always like Christopher Rufo fighting with Homath, or Richard Hanania fighting against everybody else, or this and that. On Substack, it's always like men versus women. Like it's like gender slop dominates Substack. But the problem with gender slop is that it is by definition unresolvable. Like women aren't going to move. Like they're not going to move. Like they'll admit that you're right. You will, for a moment, argue them out of their position, but they're never going to make their public position that women's choices need to be restricted. And the only way out of this mess is that women's choices will have to be restricted. And that's going to have to be the way that things go down. Women's choices will have to be restricted, but men's choices will have to be restricted too. But there's not really a market for that on Substack. There's people like Cartoons Hate Her is never going to make a concession like that. And even the women on the right who have to momentarily make concessions like this, eventually their group chat, their own fan community kind of urges them out of that. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to start answering the super chats. Maybe we'll cut it short early tonight and I'll get some more sleep. But thank you very much. Darth Kilhoon for $3. Hey Dave, staying awake to make my flight tomorrow. Glad I can finally watch your stream. Flying tomorrow morning to go be the sponsor for my friend's confirmation into the Catholic Church. Well, congratulations, God be praised. This is the week, isn't it? I guess it's next week technically where people complete their confirmations, but that's wonderful. We've got Dark Voyager for $5. Thank you very much. No super chat there. Of all weeks to give me a nice long one that I can sink my teeth in. Why don't people ask me about? Now, usually I reserve about 20 minutes for these things. We can finish early. Maybe I'll just go on a rant about something. I feel like I've covered everything, though. I've covered literature. I've covered poetry. I've covered movies. People have heard my talking about that enough. I've certainly complained enough about Twitter. I'll say this. This year I'm trying to undertake a rather large project, a large writing project. So I think I'm going to have to completely reimagine how I organize my content. I posted about the death of YouTube, and people are like, "Oh man, why don't you keep on? Why don't you keep publishing video essays?" And my response is like, uh, "Guys, I did video essays for 2 years, and they did horribly." Video essays stopped being profitable in 2021 in terms of views and clout. And I kept on making them even after that. I would write a Substack essay and then I'd make a video essay after that. And that took twice as much time to do as it ordinarily would be to make the video essay on top of the real essay itself. And I just don't have the time to do that without. And so I mean, look, if people want video essays, maybe I'll do them. But I think like the right now the opportunity is really in writing. So I want to undertake a big writing project this year. But I also want to kind of rethink about how I do my podcast format. Obviously, I'm doing an interview series with various people, and I've only done an interview series to realize how much I suck at interviewing. I monologue over my guests because I don't really know what else to do. And I'm just not used to giving space. People who are masterful interviewers. Benjamin Boyce is a masterful interviewer. Jay Burden is a masterful interviewer. They're able to have guests on and parse out topics that are really interesting. Ben Boyce in particular. He had Home Math on, and I had thought that I'd heard everything from Home Math that it was worth hearing. And Ben Boyce was able to kind of tease the thread right out and pull it until genuine substance came out the other end. And that substance that I had never heard before. And it was kind of amazing. But I'm not that person. I think that I do good fairly. If I do say so myself, I think I do good lectures. And if people want to hear lectures, then I'm happy to give them every other week, maybe mixed with some current events. I don't know. I think I might have to look into alternative hosting outside of YouTube. I don't know what good that will do me, but it seems like something is changing and I have to change along with it. Substack is still going strong, so I'll obviously always be there, or at least be there for the foreseeable future. In the meantime, I guess maybe it'll have to fall more on the shoulders of in real life organizing, which is, it's going pretty well, all things considered. Isaac Young, friend of the channel, also notable author that I've talked about on many a live stream. I've even had him on, a voice of the Zoomer generation. I have some of his books. If you meet me in person, I'll sell them to you. He says, "Cheers, Dave. Thank you very much." Blue Muggins for $25. Thank you very much, Blue Muggins. Great stream. I agree with the part about clothing completely. Tips for living next to boomer neighbors. I have several as well. Well, I mean, I guess inviting them over to talk is good. Look, you're just not going to get as much out of boomer neighbors as you will people your own age. If we lived next to people my own age, our existence here would be entirely different. And people, the older generation just does not understand this. They don't understand how different it is being in a neighborhood where everybody has kids to being in a neighborhood where it's all retirees, or it's all people who are buying up houses and then immediately flipping it so they can chase the next job opportunity halfway across the country. All the things that we saw, they were either new housing developments, which were being in the process of, like, people were staying there for 2 years, 3 years tops, no permanent community. Or there were more permanent communities like the one we lived in, where the entire neighborhood is dominated by, for lack of a better way of putting it, geriatrics. So, that is what it is. But the way I would interact with them is I already kind of said it. The dinner party is your best utility. The other thing is to sort of offer to take care of their pets and exchange pet care. That's another way to kind of make friends with them. Look, I think if you get to know boomers, like, they might be old, but they are still a resource. They're still a huge resource. and you want to know what there is, how to live in this environment that you are in. And like your physical space might be geriatric, but that means that your Rolodex has to have a geriatric section in it. You cannot afford to be disconnected from the people you live around. So, fire up the dinner parties, polish off your knowledge of wine. I'm trying to figure that out myself, and then develop a new skill with them. I'd say that's a very worthwhile investment. Certainly more worthwhile than the latest Twitter drama. I can guarantee you that, especially if it's the typical "I denounce the distant right," for the 40 billionth time. Ben White for $3. This might be the last super chat of the evening. Thanks for what you do, Dave. I am trying to get through these days with sleep deprivation. Work's always busy before April 15th. Well, I can sense that you are. My cold reading is I sense that you might be an accountant. Can't wait to go back to 8 hours of sleep, gym maxing 5 days a week. Well, I salute your effort at gym maxing. Probably one of the better things a young man could do. And keep up the good work if you are indeed an accountant this time of year. I need to do my expenses and all the other boring stuff. But I feel as the end of this series, I should do a psalm reading. Psalm reading for Lent. Okay. Let's do Psalm 51. That sounds like a good one. Psalm 51 for Lent, King James Version. That'll be a good way to send off. A fairly long one, but a long but good one. All right. Well, thank you all for joining me. This is Psalm 51. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness. According unto the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me of my sin. For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sins are ever before me. Against thee, thee only have I sinned, and done this evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest, to be clear when thou judgest. Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Behold, thou desirest truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part thou shalt make me known wisdom. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Make me to hear joy and gladness, of the bones which thou hast broken may rejoice. Hide thy face from thy sins, and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from thy presence, and take not thine spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of salvation, and uphold me a free spirit. Then will I teach transgressors thy way, and sinners shall be converted unto thine. Deliver me from blood guilt, O God, thou God of my salvation, and my tongue shall sing aloud of thy righteousness. O Lord, upon thy lips and my mouth shall spew forth praise, for thou desirest not sacrifice, else would I give it. Thou delightest not in burnt offerings. The sacrifices of God are broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. God, thou wilt not despise. Good in thy own pleasure unto Zion, build the walls of Jerusalem. Then shalt thou be pleased with the sacrifices of righteousness, with burnt offerings, and with whole offerings. Then shall they offer bullocks upon thine altar. Well, guys, thank you for this wonderful series, and thank you for your patience. I hope you enjoyed this break from the regularly scheduled content, and I hope you have a wonderful Holy Week. And I'll see you on the other side with the resuming of the Fiddler's Green podcast. Have a wonderful night and a blessed